On November 17, 1989, Gerald Hudak boarded the 11:40 p.m. Capital Limited in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He had a reserved coach seat, 14C, and a one-way ticket to Washington. At 2:18 a.m., somewhere between Lancaster and Philadelphia, the overnight train went quiet. Amtrak's internal investigation ruled it a documentation error, passenger confusion. Closed in 6 weeks. But they didn't explain why Gerald Hudak's seat showed continuous occupancy on every conductor check from Harrisburg to Baltimore. All 3 separate crew members swore they never saw him at all. They didn't explain why his luggage arrived in Washington without him. And they didn't explain why his ticket was found in the conductor's logbook, torn in half, but never punched. Darlene Marsh had worked transportation investigations for the Interstate Commerce Commission for 11 years. Missing cargo, falsified manifests, insurance fraud on derailments. She'd never investigated a missing person. That wasn't her jurisdiction. But when Gerald Hudak's sister filed a complaint alleging Amtrak had lost her brother somewhere between Harrisburg and Washington, the case landed on Marsh's desk because nobody else wanted it. The file was thin, 6 pages. A passenger manifest printed on dot matrix paper, the ticket stub in a plastic sleeve, and a single paragraph summary that used the phrase, "no evidence of irregularity," 3 times. Marsh read it twice. Then she pulled out her yellow legal pad and wrote the first question that didn't have an answer. How does a man vanish from a moving train without anyone noticing? The Harrisburg station agent was a man named Earl Wentz. 42 years with the railroad, the last 8 behind the ticket counter. Marsh found him on a Tuesday morning, sorting through a stack of lost and found claims.
You sold him the ticket?
I sell 100 tickets a day. But I remember this one because of the sister. She came in here 3 times asking questions. Crying.
Do you remember anything about the transaction?
One way to Washington, paid cash. That's all I got.
Marsh wrote it down. Cash payment, no credit card trail. She asked if there was security footage from that night.
Cameras went out in October. Still waiting on the repair order.
Marsh underlined cameras out twice. Gerald Hudak had worked as an accountant for a freight forwarding company in Scranton. His sister, Patty Hudak Brennan, lived in Arlington. She'd filed the missing person report when her brother didn't arrive for Thanksgiving.
He called me from Harrisburg, said he was about to board, said he'd see me in the morning.
Did he sound worried? Nervous?
Gerald always sounded nervous. He was an anxious person. But this was different.
Different how?
He asked me if I still had the spare key to his apartment. Said if anything happened, I should get his files. His work files.
Did you?
By the time I got there, someone had already cleaned the place out. Landlord said Gerald had called and authorized it.
Marsh asked when. Patty said November 18th, the day after Gerald vanished. The conductor who worked the Harrisburg to Philadelphia leg that night was named Roy Lassiter. 23 years on the rails. Marsh tracked him to a diner in Lancaster, where he ate breakfast every morning before his shift.
I already talked to the Amtrak investigators.
I'm not Amtrak. I'm federal.
Same questions, though, right?
Did you punch Gerald Hudak's ticket?
Lassiter stirred his coffee, didn't look up.
I punch every ticket. That's my job.
His ticket was found in your logbook. Torn, but not punched.
Then someone put it there after.
After what?
After I did my rounds? I don't know how it got there. I punch every ticket.
Marsh noticed his hands weren't steady. Marsh requested the original conductor's logbook from that night. Amtrak said it had been destroyed per standard retention policy. 90 days.
The case was still open 90 days later.
The retention policy is automatic. We don't make exceptions.
Marsh asked who had signed off on the destruction. The clerk checked the records.
Shows here it was the shift supervisor, a Glenn Pittman.
Where can I find Mr. Pittman?
He transferred to the Chicago hub back in January.
Marsh wrote down the name. Then she asked for copies of the seat assignment records from that night. The clerk said those were kept separately in Philadelphia.
You'll need to file a formal request. Takes about 3 weeks.
Marsh had learned to recognize when she was being stalled. While waiting for the formal records, Marsh drove to the freight forwarding company in Scranton, where Gerald Hudak had worked. The building was a converted warehouse near the rail yards. A sign out front read, Northeast Corridor Logistics, since 1952. The office manager, a woman named Linda Carver, met her in the reception area.
Gerald was a good employee. Quiet. Kept to himself.
When did he leave the company?
He didn't leave. He just stopped coming in. November 15th.
2 days before he disappeared.
Is that what happened? We figured he just quit. Some people do that.
Did he take anything with him? Files, records?
Carver's expression flickered, just for a moment.
Gerald was an accountant. He had access to a lot of files. I couldn't tell you what he might have taken.
Marsh asked to see Gerald's workspace. Carver hesitated, then led her down a narrow hallway to a small office with a frosted glass door. The desk was empty. The filing cabinet stood open, their drawers bare.
Someone cleaned this out.
Company policy. When an employee leaves, we secure their materials.
Who did the securing?
I did. Me and the night supervisor.
Name?
Tom Pruitt. He's not here today.
Marsh looked at the empty shelves. A single photograph remained, tacked to the corkboard. Gerald Hudak, standing next to a freight car, smiling awkwardly, holding a clipboard.
What kind of freight does this company handle?
General cargo. Whatever fits in a container.
The answer came too fast, too practiced. At night, Marsh sat in her motel room outside Scranton, with the case file spread across the bed. She made a list of what she knew. Gerald Hudak, accountant, nervous, called his sister about files, apartment cleaned out by someone claiming to be him. The train, ticket unpunched, seat showing occupied. 3 crew members who saw nothing. The company, files gone, office emptied, evasive manager. She made a second list of what she didn't know. What was in Gerald's files? Why he was going to Washington? Who cleaned his apartment? Why the conductor's logbook was destroyed? Why the security cameras were conveniently broken? Marsh drew a line connecting the 2 lists. At the center, she wrote a single word. Cargo. Gerald Hudak had spent 8 years tracking what went into freight containers. He'd found something worth running to Washington about. And someone had made sure he never arrived. The next morning, Marsh drove to the Scranton Police Department. She wanted to see the original missing person report.
Hudak, Gerald. Yeah, we got a file. Not much in it.
Who handled the case?
Detective Krupka. He's out on a call. Should be back around noon.
Marsh waited. At 12:15, a heavy-set man in a brown suit walked in, carrying a fast food bag. He looked at Marsh like she was a problem he didn't want.
Federal investigator. For a missing person case?
Transportation complaint. The family thinks Amtrak lost him.
Amtrak didn't lose him. The guy got off the train somewhere and walked away. People do that.
His luggage arrived in Washington without him.
So he forgot his bag.
Marsh asked if he'd investigated the apartment cleaning. Krupka's face went flat.
That's not a crime. The landlord had authorization.
Marsh spent 3 days trying to reach Tom Pruitt, the night supervisor at Northeast Corridor Logistics. His home number rang unanswered. His landlady said he'd moved out in December, left no forwarding address. On the 4th day, Marsh found him working the loading dock at a warehouse in Wilkes-Barre.
I don't work for Northeast anymore.
I know. I want to ask about Gerald Hudak.
I barely knew the guy.
You helped clean out his office.
Pruitt stopped stacking boxes. He looked around the warehouse, checking who might be listening.
That was Linda's idea. She said we had to secure everything before anyone came asking questions.
Before the police?
Before anyone.
What was in those files, Tom?
I didn't look. I just loaded boxes into a truck.
What truck?
The truck, according to Pruitt, had been a white panel van with no markings. 2 men had loaded the boxes while Linda Carver supervised. Pruitt remembered one detail. The van had Pennsylvania plates, but the men spoke with Baltimore accents.
I asked Linda what was going on. She said it was a federal matter and I should forget I saw anything.
Federal?
That's what she said. I figured maybe Gerald was in trouble with the IRS or something.
Did you believe that?
I believed I wanted to keep my job.
Marsh asked why he'd left Northeast Corridor.
Because 3 weeks after Gerald disappeared, somebody broke into my car and left a note on my steering wheel. Said I should find work somewhere else.
Did you keep the note?
I burned it. Then I moved.
Marsh could see the fear still sitting behind his eyes. Marsh drove back to Scranton and parked across the street from Northeast Corridor Logistics. She sat there for 3 hours, watching trucks come and go. Most were standard freight carriers, marked with company names and DOT numbers. But twice she saw the white panel van that Pruitt had described. No markings, Pennsylvania plates. The driver never got out. Someone from inside the warehouse loaded boxes directly into the back, and the van pulled away. Marsh wrote down the plate number. Then she called her office in Washington and asked a colleague to run it.
That plate comes back to a company called Chesapeake Transit Services, registered in Baltimore. Want the address?
Please.
214 Pratt Street. But here's the thing, Darlene. I ran the company through our database. They're flagged.
Flag how?
DEA inquiry. 18 months ago. Case went nowhere, but the flag's still active.
The seat assignment records arrived from Philadelphia on a Friday. 3 weeks, exactly as the clerk had promised. Marsh spread them across her desk and worked backward through the night of November 17th. Seat 14C, Gerald Hudak's assigned seat, showed a status of occupied at every conductor check from Harrisburg through Baltimore. 5 checks total. Someone had been sitting in that seat for the entire trip, but the passenger manifest only showed one name for 14C. Gerald Hudak. No transfer, no reassignment, no notation of a switch. And according to the conductor, Roy Lassiter, he had never seen the man. Marsh pulled out the torn ticket stub from the evidence sleeve. She held it up to the light. The punch pattern was wrong. Every Amtrak conductor had a unique punch design, registered with the company. This ticket had been punched, but not with Lassiter's pattern. Someone else had punched Gerald Hudak's ticket. Someone who wasn't supposed to be on that train. Marsh submitted a request for the punch pattern registry. Amtrak told her that information was internal and not subject to ICC oversight. She filed a formal demand. Amtrak's legal department responded that they would comply within 60 days, pending review. Marsh didn't have 60 days. She drove to Baltimore instead. The address on Pratt Street was a narrow building squeezed between a marine supply store and a tax preparer. The sign in the window said, Chesapeake Transit Services, Freight Forwarding and Logistics. The door was locked. The lights were off. A notice taped to the glass said the office had relocated. No new address provided. Marsh walked around to the alley behind the building. The back door had been recently replaced, the frame still showing fresh splinters. Someone had left in a hurry. On the ground near the dumpster, she found a single sheet of paper, a shipping manifest dated November 15th, 1989. 2 days before Gerald Hudak boarded the train. The manifest listed a shipment from Scranton to Baltimore. Cargo type, machine parts. Weight, 400 pounds. Consignee, Chesapeake Transit Services. The shipper was listed as Northeast Corridor Logistics, authorized by G. Hudak. Marsh drove back to Washington and spent the weekend cross-referencing shipping records. Gerald Hudak's signature appeared on 47 manifests over the past 8 months. All of them listed machine parts as cargo. All of them went to Baltimore, and all of them were exactly 400 pounds. Machine parts don't come in identical weights. Marsh had investigated enough freight fraud to know that. 47 shipments, same weight, same destination, same vague cargo description. That wasn't manufacturing. That was a system. Gerald Hudak had been signing off on something that wasn't machine parts, and somewhere along the line, he'd decided to stop. Monday morning, Marsh called the DEA field office in Baltimore. She explained who she was and asked about the Chesapeake Transit inquiry from 18 months ago.
That case is closed. No charges filed. I understand. I'm working a related matter. Transportation complaint. Transportation? A man disappeared on an Amtrak train in November. He worked for a freight company that was shipping to Chesapeake Transit.
There was a long pause on the line.
What was his name?
Gerald Hudak.
Hold on.
Marsh waited. When the agent came back, his voice had changed.
I'm going to transfer you to someone. Don't hang up.
The line clicked. Marsh listened to dead air for nearly 2 minutes before a new voice came on.
Ms. Marsh, this is Supervisory Special Agent Denton. I think we need to talk in person.
Agent Denton met her at a coffee shop in Silver Spring, not at the DEA office. He was a compact man in his 50s with gray hair cut short and eyes that didn't miss anything.
Gerald Hudak was a person of interest in our investigation. Not a target, a potential witness.
Witness to what?
I can't discuss an active investigation.
You said the case was closed.
Marsh waited. Denton stirred his coffee.
6 months before he disappeared, Gerald Hudak contacted our office anonymously. Said he had information about narcotics moving through the Northeast Freight Corridor. We arranged a meeting. He never showed.
Did he say why?
No, he just stopped calling. We assumed he got cold feet.
Or someone found out.
Denton didn't disagree. Marsh asked Denton what he knew about Northeast Corridor logistics.
Small operation. Handles freight for about a dozen companies in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area. On paper, completely legitimate.
And off paper?
We believe they're one of several intermediaries in a pipeline running from the Canadian border to Baltimore and Washington.
Cocaine?
Heroin, high grade. The shipments come down through New York, get broken up in Pennsylvania, and move south disguised as commercial freight.
The machine parts.
Among other things.
Marsh told him about the 47 manifests. Denton's expression didn't change, but he wrote something in a small notebook.
Gerald Hudak was signing off on those shipments for 8 months. Then he stopped. Then he tried to contact us. Then he disappeared.
And nobody at your office thought to look into it.
By the time we made the connection, he was already gone.
Marsh drove back to Philadelphia that night. She needed to talk to Roy Lassiter again. The conductor had lied about punching Gerald Hudak's ticket. She wanted to know why. She found him at the same diner in Lancaster, sitting in the same booth, eating the same breakfast. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago.
The ticket wasn't punched with your pattern, Roy.
I told you. Someone must have put it there after.
Who punched it?
I don't know.
There was someone else on that train. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who punched that ticket and sat in that seat for 5 hours while Gerald Hudak was... what? Already dead?
Lassiter's hands started shaking again. He put down his fork.
I don't know what happened to him.
But you know something happened.
He didn't answer. He just stared at his plate like it might give him somewhere to hide. Marsh sat in silence. She'd learned that waiting was often more effective than asking. After 3 minutes, Lassiter spoke.
There was a man who got on at Harrisburg. Not a regular passenger. He showed railroad credentials. Said he was doing a security check.
What kind of credentials?
Amtrak ID. Looked real? I didn't question it.
What did he look like?
Average. Brown hair, medium build, forgettable.
What did he do on the train?
He walked through my car once, checked a few seats, then he went toward the back, and I didn't see him again until Philadelphia.
When you did your rounds, who was sitting in 14C?
Lassiter's jaw tightened.
A man, reading a book. I didn't look close. I just marked the seat occupied and moved on.
Was it Gerald Hudak?
I don't know. I never saw Gerald Hudak.
Marsh asked about the man with the Amtrak credentials. Lassiter said he'd reported it to his supervisor the next day, after he heard about the missing passenger complaint.
Glenn Pittman. He was shift supervisor at the time.
The same Glenn Pittman who authorized destroying your logbook?
Yeah.
What did he say when you reported the security check?
He said not to worry about it. Said it was probably routine and I should forget about it.
And you believed him?
I believed I had 12 years until my pension, and I didn't want to cause problems.
Marsh asked if he'd seen the man with credentials since that night.
Once. 3 weeks later, he was in Pittman's office, door closed. I walked past and they both stopped talking.
Did Pittman introduce you?
No. He told me to go do my pre-departure check. When I came back, the man was gone.
Glenn Pittman had transferred to Chicago in January. Marsh called the Amtrak personnel office and requested his current work schedule. They said that information was confidential. She filed another formal demand. The response came back in 3 days. Glenn Pittman had resigned from Amtrak on February 15th. No forwarding address on file. Marsh called Linda Carver at Northeast Corridor Logistics. The receptionist said Miss Carver was on indefinite leave. No, she couldn't provide a contact number. Company policy. Marsh tried Detective Krupka in Scranton. He didn't return her calls. She sat in her office and looked at her list of witnesses. 3 had disappeared. 1 was terrified. 1 was stonewalling. The case was 6 months old, and everyone who might have answers was either gone or hiding. Marsh knew what that meant. Someone was cleaning up. 3 days later, Marsh received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed a man in a suit stepping out of a car in what looked like a parking garage. The note said, "The man who got on at Harrisburg asked DEA about Frank Holbrook." Marsh called Agent Denton immediately.
Where did you get this?
Anonymous tip. Who is Frank Holbrook?
Denton was quiet for a long moment.
Holbrook worked for us. Undercover operations, Northeast Corridor. He was embedded with a transportation crew out of Baltimore.
Was?
He went off-grid in December. We assumed he'd been compromised.
Or he compromised himself.
That's one theory.
He was on that train, Agent Denton. He had fake Amtrak credentials. And Gerald Hudak never made it to Washington.
The line went silent. When Denton spoke again, his voice was careful.
I think you should come to Baltimore.
The DEA field office in Baltimore was a concrete building on the edge of the Harbor District. Denton met her in a conference room on the 3rd floor. 2 other agents sat at the table, faces blank.
Frank Holbrook was one of our best. 12 years undercover. He helped us take down 3 major distribution networks.
And now?
Now, we don't know what he is.
One of the other agents slid a file across the table. Marsh opened it. Inside were surveillance photographs, financial records, and a timeline.
6 months before Gerald Hudak disappeared, Holbrook started making unauthorized contacts with people outside his operation. We thought he was developing new sources. Now, we're not sure.
You think he turned?
I think someone offered him enough money to make 12 years of service feel like a bad deal.
And Gerald Hudak was going to expose the whole operation.
Gerald Hudak was going to give us names, routes, and account numbers. Everything Holbrook had been protecting.
Marsh studied the timeline. Frank Holbrook had been in Harrisburg on November 17th. His DEA-issued vehicle had been recorded by a toll camera on the turnpike, heading south at 11:15 p.m. 25 minutes before Gerald Hudak's train departed.
He boarded the train, used fake credentials to get access. What happened after that?
We don't know.
Someone sat in seat 14C for 5 hours. Someone punched Hudak's ticket with a conductor's punch that wasn't Lassiter's.
Holbrook could have gotten a punch. They're not hard to acquire if you know where to look.
So he punched the ticket, sat in the seat, made it look like Hudak was still on board. Meanwhile, Hudak was...
Marsh looked at the surveillance photographs. Frank Holbrook had an ordinary face. Forgettable. Exactly as Lassiter had described.
He took him off the train somewhere between Harrisburg and Lancaster, before the first conductor check.
That's our assessment.
Marsh asked where Holbrook was now. Denton said they'd tracked him to a rental property in Delaware 2 weeks ago, but by the time they arrived, he was gone.
He's got resources, money, contacts, false identities. He could be anywhere.
And the people he was protecting? The pipeline?
Still operating. We've identified most of the network, but we can't move without exposing our remaining sources.
Northeast Corridor Logistics?
Shut down last month. Linda Carver and 2 others disappeared. We think they're in Canada.
Marsh thought about Gerald Hudak, an accountant who'd signed his name to 47 shipments before his conscience caught up with him. He'd tried to do the right thing. He'd tried to contact the DEA. And somewhere in that building, someone had been working for the other side.
Was Holbrook your only leak?
We don't know.
The answer hung in the air like smoke. That night, Marsh drove back to Scranton. She had one more person to find. The anonymous source who'd sent her the photograph of Frank Holbrook. The envelope had been postmarked locally. The handwriting was neat, careful. Someone who knew about the case. Someone who wanted it solved but couldn't come forward directly. Marsh made a list. Tom Pruitt was scared, but he'd left town months ago. Roy Lassiter was cooperating, but he didn't have that kind of information. Detective Krupke had stonewalled her from the start. Linda Carver was gone. That left one person who'd been there from the beginning. Someone who'd seen everything but claimed to know nothing. Someone who'd been on indefinite leave from the company that processed the shipments. Marsh found Linda Carver's home address in the company records she'd subpoenaed. The house was dark when she arrived, but there was a car in the driveway and a light in the basement window. Linda Carver answered the door on the 3rd knock. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hand shook when she reached for the chain.
How did you find me?
I'm an investigator. Finding people is what I do.
I can't talk to you.
You already did. The photograph. The note about Holbrook.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You sent it because you wanted someone to know the truth. But you were too scared to come forward. You still are.
Carver stood in the doorway, frozen between fear and something else. Something that looked like exhaustion.
They killed Gerald. They'll kill me too if they find out I talk.
They?
The people Gerald was going to expose. The people who own this whole operation.
Frank Holbrook?
Holbrook is just the cleaner. He does what he's told.
Told by who?
Carver let her inside. The house was half-packed, boxes stacked against walls, furniture covered with sheets. She was leaving. Maybe tonight.
I've worked for Northeast for 9 years. I knew something was wrong with the shipments. The same weight every time. The same destination. But I didn't ask questions.
Until Gerald did.
Gerald was different. He actually read the manifests. He noticed the patterns. And then he found the secondary books.
What secondary books?
The real records. The ones that showed what was actually in those containers. Holbrook kept them at a warehouse in Wilkes Barre. Gerald copied them.
Where are those copies now?
Gerald took them. He said he was going to Washington. Said he had a contact at the DEA who could protect him.
Marsh felt something cold settle in her stomach.
His contact at the DEA was Frank Holbrook.
Carver nodded. Her eyes were wet.
Gerald walked right into the trap.
Marsh sat in the half-empty living room and put the pieces together aloud.
Gerald Hudak discovered the heroin shipments in March. He spent months copying the secondary books, building a case. He contacted the DEA anonymously, but the agent he reached was Frank Holbrook, who was already on the take. Holbrook set up a meeting, but Gerald got suspicious and never showed. So Holbrook waited.
Gerald thought he was being careful.
He was, but not careful enough. In November, Gerald decided to go over Holbrook's head. He bought a ticket to Washington, probably to meet someone at DEA headquarters directly. Holbrook found out. He boarded the train at Harrisburg with fake credentials, took Gerald off somewhere between stations, and sat in his seat for the rest of the trip to make it look like nothing happened.
And the copies? The books Gerald took?
Holbrook has them. Or destroyed them.
Carver shook her head slowly.
No. Gerald made 2 copies. I know where the second one is.
The second copy was in a storage unit in Dunmore, 3 miles outside Scranton. Gerald had rented it under a false name and given Carver the key 2 days before he disappeared.
He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to the FBI. Not the DEA. The FBI.
Why didn't you?
Because 2 days after Gerald vanished, someone broke into my office and left a photograph on my desk. It was my sister's house. My niece playing in the yard. The message was clear.
But you kept the key.
I kept it because Gerald was my friend, and because someday I wanted someone to know what happened to him.
She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small brass key on a plain ring. Marsh took the key. It was warm from being held.
Come with me. I can get you into protective custody.
No, I'm leaving tonight. Don't try to find me.
The storage facility in Dunmore was closed when Marsh arrived, but the gate code Carver had given her still worked. Unit 17 was in the back row, a corrugated metal door with a padlock that matched the key. Inside, covered with a canvas tarp, sat a 1972 Buick Skylark. The trunk was rusted shut, but it opened with enough force. Under the spare tire, exactly as Carver had described, was a metal lockbox. Marsh carried it back to her car and opened it under the dome light. Inside were 3 spiral-bound notebooks, filled with columns of numbers, dates, and codes. A separate sheet translated the codes: weights, routes, distribution points, and account numbers. And in the back of the last notebook, a list of names. Gerald Hudak had been thorough. He'd documented everything: the pipeline, the payments, the people. And at the top of the list, circled twice in red ink, was a name Marsh recognized: Glenn Pittman, the Amtrak supervisor who destroyed the conductor's logbook, the man who transferred to Chicago and then disappeared. Marsh drove through the night to Baltimore. She called Denton from a payphone outside Wilmington and told him what she'd found. He told her to bring everything to the field office. He sounded different, tense.
Contact with who?
With me. He wants to come in.
You believe him?
I believe he's running out of options. The people he was working for don't like loose ends. He's become one.
Where is he?
He gave us a location: an abandoned rail yard outside Philadelphia. He wants to meet tonight.
It's a trap.
Maybe. But if there's a chance he'll turn over evidence, name names, we have to take it.
Marsh thought about Gerald Hudak, who'd taken that same chance 6 months ago.
I want to be there.
This is a DEA operation.
Gerald Hudak was my case. I want to see it through.
The rail yard was outside Chester, Pennsylvania, an old freight switching station that had been abandoned since the 70s. Denton's team arrived first, 6 agents in unmarked cars. Marsh parked on the perimeter and watched through binoculars. Holbrook appeared at 11:15, walking out of the darkness between 2 rusted boxcars. He was alone, hands visible, moving slowly. Denton stepped forward to meet him. From her position, Marsh could see Holbrook's face in the headlight beams. It was the same face from the photograph. Ordinary. Forgettable. The face of a man who'd spent 12 years pretending to be someone else. She watched them talk. Holbrook's body language was defensive, shoulders hunched, head down. Denton kept his hand near his weapon. The other agents formed a loose perimeter, watching the shadows. Then Holbrook said something that made Denton step back. Even from 50 yards away, Marsh could see the change in his posture. Something had shifted. Marsh got out of her car and walked toward the scene. One of the perimeter agents tried to stop her, but she showed her credentials and kept moving. By the time she reached Denton, Holbrook was talking fast, his words tumbling out like he'd been holding them for months.
Pittman was the coordinator. He handled the rail connections, made sure the manifests matched, the schedules aligned. He was the one who told me about Hudak.
Told you to do what?
To handle it. Those were his words. Handle it.
Where is Gerald Hudak?
Holbrook turned to look at her. His eyes were empty, flat, like windows into nothing.
Who are you?
The person who's been asking questions for 6 months. Where is he?
I don't know.
You took him off that train.
I took him off the train. I handed him over. What happened after that wasn't my operation.
Handed him over to who?
Holbrook gave them a name. A Baltimore businessman with connections to the harbor and a reputation for making problems disappear. Denton knew the name. His face went pale when he heard it.
You're sure?
He's the one who paid me.
For 3 years, he's the one who paid me. Pittman answered to him. The whole pipeline answers to him.
And Gerald Hudak?
I handed him over at a rest stop outside Lancaster. There were 2 men waiting. They put him in a van and drove north.
North?
Toward the mountains.
That's all I know.
Marsh thought about the Pocono wilderness. Miles of empty forest. Places where a body could disappear forever.
He's dead.
Probably.
I didn't ask.
You didn't care.
I did my job.
Marsh looked at the man who had ended Gerald Hudak's life as casually as punching a ticket. She wanted to feel rage. Instead, she felt something colder. Certainty. The arrest happened fast. Holbrook went into federal custody. The Baltimore businessman was picked up at his home 3 hours later, along with Glenn Pittman, who'd been hiding in a motel outside Wheeling, West Virginia. The secondary books from Gerald Hudak's storage unit provided enough evidence for a federal grand jury. Over the next 2 weeks, 14 people were indicted. The heroin pipeline that had run from Canada to Washington for nearly a decade was dismantled piece by piece. Newspapers called it one of the largest drug trafficking prosecutions in the region's history, but Gerald Hudak was never found. Search teams combed the Pocono wilderness for 3 weeks. They found nothing. No body, no clothing, no evidence that he'd ever been there. Marsh stood in the federal courthouse in Baltimore on the day the indictments were announced. A reporter asked her how it felt to break the case. She said it didn't feel like anything. The man who'd started it all was still missing. The case wasn't closed. It was just paused. 6 months after the indictments, Marsh received the package at her office. No return address. Inside was a paperback book, a worn copy of a detective novel from the 1940s. A bookmark had been placed at page 147. Marsh opened it and found a single sentence underlined in pencil. The dead have their own justice, separate from ours. There was nothing else. No note, no explanation. Marsh checked the postmark. It had been mailed from Harrisburg. She sat at her desk for a long time, holding the book. Gerald Hudak had been carrying a paperback when he boarded the train. His sister had mentioned it. A detective novel. His favorite. The book had arrived in Washington with his luggage. It had been logged as evidence, then returned to the family. Patty Hudak Brennan had kept it in a drawer for 6 months, until someone had taken it, underlined a passage, and mailed it to the investigator who'd found the truth. Darlene Marsh closed the Gerald Hudak file on a Tuesday afternoon in the fall of 1990. The official determination was closed, inconclusive. No body had been recovered. No direct evidence of murder had been found. The men responsible for the drug pipeline were in federal prison, but none of them would say what had happened to the accountant who tried to expose them. The paperback book sat in an evidence bag in Marsh's desk drawer. She never logged it, never told anyone about it. Some evidence, she'd learned, wasn't meant for official files. Gerald Hudak had boarded a train in Harrisburg with a one-way ticket and a briefcase full of truth. He'd vanished somewhere in the darkness between stations, erased by the people he'd tried to bring down. But his records had survived. His evidence had spoken for him. The train still ran the same route every night. 11:40 from Harrisburg, arriving Washington by morning. Seat 14C was just another seat now. But sometimes, the conductor said, passengers would ask to sit somewhere else. They never said why. Some journeys end at the station. Some end in the space between.